Though the Meramec River looks peaceful today, it was St. Louis's playground a century ago, with resorts, cabins, and beaches lining the riverbanks. There were also over a dozen communities that lived on the Meramec. Most of them were small, like Glencoe, Sherman, Fern Glen, Minky, Morshalls, and Petty's Hill. The three biggest of these communities are Valley Park, Fenton, and Eureka. Each of these towns were different, with unique histories, designs, and businesses. Times Beach is perhaps one of the best-known resorts on the Meramec. Founded in 1925 by the newspaper St. Louis Star-Times, the resort exploded after the arrival of Route 66 in 1931, which brought many new businesses such as Steiny's Inn and Chicken Coop Restaurant. After World War II, the resort transitioned into a tight-knit city of 2,000 residents and continued to thrive until a devastating flood and an environmental disasters destroyed it in the 1980s.
In 1971, myself and several neighbors had gotten together and we paid Russell Bliss $50 a barrel to spray the streets in front of our houses to suppress the dust. As a result of that venture, in 72 and 73, the city contracted with Russell Bliss to spray at will. On November the 11th of 1982, I got a call from Times Beach City Hall saying that a reporter had just called there and told them that Times Beach was on a list of sites suspected to have been sprayed by a waste oil hauler with a chemical containing dioxin.
When the water from the rampaging Meramec River poured through Times Beach, Missouri early in December, it was called the flood of the century. But the news from federal health officials may be worse than the flood. Officials at the Center for Disease Control in Atlanta say preliminary testing shows Times Beach is contaminated with a chemical waste, dioxin. The recommendation is that no one should live here, and even cleanup workers should evacuate.
In 1983, this place was a mess. And it was the only place where we could actually meet. We did meet a few times at the school, but they were concerned about the safety of the public officials that were coming. And so we met with Ann Burford and Rita Lavelle and the people from FEMA and the Center for Disease Control here.
While the announcement was being made to the media behind closed doors, some 200 Times Beach residents were informed of the buyout proposal secondhand.
The federal officials today were carefully shielded by guards from the people of Times Beach, waiting outside the news conference room, and the officials left by a back passageway after a 20-minute news conference. They had briefed a few Times Beach officials privately before that conference.
My family and I were out of the site. I didn't want to stay. But for 2 weeks, my husband begged me. I cried. I threatened divorce. He said, Marilyn, let's do it like this. You run for mayor, I'll run for marshal, we'll do it together. And so I agreed. After that election, then John Ashcroft decided that the city needed to be disincorporated. We had no more money to operate the city. So he appointed me trustee to see the buyout through to completion.
In 1997, the land reopened as Route 66 State Park, a beautiful park with miles of trails, picnic shelters, and a seasonal visitor center. Besides Times Beach, there were several other bigger resorts along the Meramec River, like Lincoln Beach, Meramec Highlands, and Famous-Barr Outing Farm. The Meramec Highlands was one of the first resorts on the Meramec. The story of the Highlands begins in 1890 when Marcus Bernheimer, president of the St. Louis Mercantile Exchange, bought 500 acres in Kirkwood, off of Quinette Road. Though the resort was open for picnicking and boating as early as 1892, an official grand opening wasn't held until May 15, 1895. The purpose of the Meramec Highlands was to be a health resort. It had a mineral spring, mineral bathhouses, and even a resident physician. In the heart of the resort, there was a depot on the St. Louis-San Francisco Railroad. 15 cottages, general store, post office, and a dance hall perched on top of a railroad tunnel. The Highlands Inn was the crown jewel of the resort. Towering over the railroad, the hotel was 5 stories tall, had 125 rooms, indoor plumbing, and electricity, a novelty at the time. The inn was a haven for parties, club meetings, and even family reunions. Along the Meramec River, there was Stites Beach, the Highlands Canoe Club, and a ford, or a concrete water crossing across the Meramec at Giles Landing. The success of the Meramec Highlands was short-lived, however. After streetcars were installed in 1896, large crowds flocked to the grounds, pushing the wealthy out, who missed the peacefulness that the resort had in the earlier years.
People from the city could come out for 5 cents. It was just average people that wanted to go out and swim, fish, boat, whatever. And they could get out there real easy on the streetcars and then go back to the city. And as a result, they didn't spend much money at the hotel or the concessions. They'd bring their food out with them in baskets or whatever, and they wouldn't necessarily help the cause of making money for the guy that developed the resort. But people came out for the dance halls. It was kind of a honky-tonk area. Lots of illegal liquor. It just wasn't a place that parents wanted their children to go to. So it had kind of a bad reputation at points.
During this time in the resort's history, transients and other unsavory characters stayed on the grounds on their way through the area. There was even a gangster named Pretty Boy Floyd that spent some time there while robbing Kroger's in St. Louis.
He and another guy from Oklahoma, Charles Hildebrandt, was a local guy, hooked up. They got tired of working hard on the threshing machines and the harvest crews that were going around. And this other guy had been a minor crook in St. Louis, and he'd been robbing Kroger stores and corner stores, and he convinced Floyd that they could go to St. Louis and make a big haul by robbing stores. So they hopped on the freight train, they got up to St. Louis near Valley Park, and they asked where's the place to stay, and they were directed to the general store. They planned their robbery. They robbed the Kroger payroll, got like $13,000 and split it up between them. The storekeeper joined in.
In 1925, the property was sold to developer Ralph Bixby, who changed the name to Osage Hills and constructed the Osage Hills Country Club and subdivision across Big Bend from the original resort. After the railroad depot closed in 1932, the older side of the resort transitioned into a quiet neighborhood. Signs about the park's history can be found at Green Tree Park and D. Kestering Park, where stonework for the resort was sourced back in the 1890s. During the height of the Meramec Highlands, a company retreat opened in Eureka. The Famous-Barr outing farm opened on June 30th, 1906, on a sprawling 500-acre farm owned by Civil War hero Jesse Joplin and his wife Mary on Bald Hill Road. Unlike Meramec Highlands, the resort was not open to the public and was strictly for employees of the Famous-Barr department store and their families. After a brief stay in the neighboring town of Crescent, the resort returned to Eureka during the summer of 1909, when the company purchased 125 acres on Lewis Road, near the border of St. Louis County and Jefferson County. The third location of the resort opened on June 5, 1910, and featured a dance hall, tennis courts, over a dozen cabins, a swimming pool, a private beach on the Meramec, boat docks, and a chapel. The company also built a depot on St. Louis-San Francisco Railroad off of Blakey Road, a mile west of the resort. The crown jewel of this resort was a 2-story clubhouse. It featured 26 bedrooms, a 10,000 square foot screened-in porch, and a large entertainment space. The resort's success ran out in 1942 when it closed due to complications from World War II. In 1952, a big game hunter and inventor, Vernon Beck, and his wife Lola bought the property and turned it into their summer property. They made many changes, such as renting out the cabins and constructing a room for Vernon's taxidermy. After Vernon's sudden death in 1965, Lola had her best friend, Nova Meadows, and her family move in with her, and they lived together until Lola died in 1981. In February of 1984, a fire in the kitchen burned the summer home to the ground. Though Nova managed to escape, she lost everything except her dog. In 1997, the property reopened as Beck County Park, a beautiful park owned by Jefferson County. As World War I raged in Europe, Lincoln Beach opened in Castlewood in 1915. Developed by the Meramec Realty Company, the sprawling resort featured over 250 clubhouses, several taverns like the Lone Wolf Club, a store, a chapel, several beaches, a large hotel, and the Castlewood Pool. It also had a depot on the Missouri Pacific Railroad and a ferry on the Meramec to shuttle visitors to different beaches. Lincoln Beach was one of the most popular of the resorts on the Meramec, with an average weekend attendance around 10,000 people. There was so much to do at Lincoln Beach. People could spend their days at the resort tanning at the beaches, drinking at different taverns, and participating in beauty contests. The towering bluffs overlooking the river was a popular feature for resort goers who would hike up to the top of a series of concrete stairs and enjoy breathtaking views of the river valley below. Most of Lincoln Beach was turned into Castlewood State Park in 1974. The park is known for its scenic views and its hiking and biking trails. After World War II, interstates were constructed in St. Louis, replacing dangerous Route 66 and creating a more direct link between St. Louis City and surrounding counties, fueling the explosion of suburbia. People no longer needed to escape St. Louis anymore, since they now lived in suburbs, far away from the confines of the city. One by one, the resorts closed down and either transitioned into communities of permanent residents or disappeared altogether. As it was in the past, boating is a popular activity to enjoy during the summer, and there are a few boat ramps across St. Louis. One such boater is John Loida, who has spent most of his life exploring the Meramec and discovering its most historic spots.
My dad used to drop me and my friends off on the river. We used to do our own little float trips back before it was even popular. Believe it or not, he'd drop us off in Allenton, and it was roughly, a 6 to 8 hour float. We took our time. There was rope swings on the way, and we did a lot of exploring when we were kids. And I think that, that stuck with me my entire life, and it was something that I really enjoyed, and it stuck with me as an adult. For the historical aspect of it, between Times Beach and Glencoe and Sherman, that's my favorite section as far as the historical part of it. The main use of it is the recreation aspect of it. It's not just me. It's a whole jet boating industry. There's all kinds of kayakers and canoers and resorts on the upper end. The gravels that came out of the Meramec is what poured the concrete or was containing all the concrete on Highway 44 and Route 66 for miles and miles. So it's a wonderful resource.
From the early resorts of Meramec Highlands and Famous-Barr Outing Farm to the later resorts of Lincoln Beach and Times Beach, the Meramec has been the host of thousands of weary travelers. It still does today, with thousands of boaters and floaters that travel it every summer.